Dear friends, in our last session, we were speaking about the principles under the propensities and habits and its immutability. We said in this we have to look at two things. How a habit being introduced in my life, that means how I have acquired a habit in my life, how far I am responsible for that, and a particular activity I am doing, I am compelled and I am doing a particular activity, there how I have to understand and what all are the principles behind it. We already said if a habit is being acquired voluntarily, that means knowingly and willingly, that person is fully responsible for that habit. But sometimes if that habit is being acquired involuntarily, that means without knowing, then that person is not fully responsible for that habit any kind. Now the second part we are coming, how a particular activity within that habit may affect our moral character. I am a drug addict, involuntarily or voluntarily acquired it. Now I cannot but to smoke, or I cannot but to take the injection, or I am a drunkard, voluntarily or involuntarily, I have to go and drink compelled, otherwise early morning my hands will shake, I cannot live without liquors. And we know in this COVID-19 period, when all the liquor shops were closed, how it was very difficult for the drunkards, because they were under the addiction. Now that particular activity, whether we can judge a person morally responsible or not, this is the question. Generally speaking, again, if that person is knowing that I have this habit, and if that person is having the willingness to come out of it, and if that person is ready to counter this, taking all the precautions, even then he fails, he is not responsible, because still he is under the control of the habit and he is taking all the precautions to come out of it. Even then sometimes he may fail. It's only a failure, therefore morally speaking he is not responsible. I am a person drinking always or smoking always, and I am addicted to that, but I know that I am an addicted person and I want to come out of it, and I make all the treatments and all the precautions, prayer, this and that, everything. Even then, if I am compelled, I am forced, and if I fall, morally speaking, I am not responsible, provided that I take the necessary precaution to counter it. If I am not doing anything, then I am just telling, I am already under the habit, I cannot live without this, I am going, I am fully responsible. But if I take enough resistance and all the precautions, even then I am falling, it's a failure, I am not morally responsible. But if I am not taking any particular step to avoid it, to come out of it, I am fully responsible. These are the moral principles behind propensities and habits. And finally, we move to the final permanent impediment, and that is called mental diseases. Mental diseases. And we know this may happen, unfortunately, in the life of some people. And various types of mental diseases are there. And how far a person is responsible under the control of these mental diseases or the psychological diseases. If it is curable, then we have to go for the necessary treatment and we can come out of it. And when I am free from this, I am morally responsible for all my activities. But if I am under these mental diseases and I am not able to come out of it, I am unable to make moral decisions in my life. And if a person doing something under the moral strain, that means this mental strain, then that person is not responsible, and we have to be very generous in judging their activities. So dear friends, with this we finish our chapter on human act. So let us now just comprehend what we have said as a human act. We said first of all, a man when doing something, it can be a human act or act of a human being. Only the act that proceeds from the free will of a human person, that is called a human act. And ethics is concerned only with the human act. So then we have to know that what you mean by human will. And we say it is the rational appetite in a human person. That means to achieve the rational objectives in our life. That is called the will. And together with the will, the second faculty that is working is our intellect. So intellect in the area of knowledge and the will in the area of choice, consent and freedom. When these all things are together, we can say it is the moral act. It's a moral act. And we said when we speak about a moral act, there are two types of moral acts. They are elicited act and commanded act. Elicited act are the invisible activity, that means that is happening within our mind. Within our mind. And the commanded acts are the things that starts from the mind or the will and communicate to the external organs of ours, and when we perform it visibly, then it is called a commanded act. So a human act either may be elicited or commanded. And when we take the chains of human action, it is a combination of elicited acts and commanded acts. And from there we come to the point of voluntariness. And we said when our knowledge is free and will is free, then we can say we are voluntary in our moral responsibilities. So the important factor is there, we should have the full knowledge and we should have the full freedom and also the willingness. So it is called voluntariness. From there we moved to the concept of imputability. That means attributing moral responsibility to its agent. And if there we said again, we should have the enough knowledge regarding that matter, and also we should have enough freedom. Then only we will be able to impute or attribute the moral responsibility to its agent. From there we move to the question of imputability of evil in its cause. The four principles we said there, the life-giving principle. And again, we moved from imputability to the concept of impediments, the moral blocks. And there are two types of impediments, transitory and permanent. And we have already seen what all are the transitory impediments and how it will affect us as ignorance, concupiscence, violence and fear. And the permanent impediments, so it is infancy, idiocy and moralism, propensities and habits and mental diseases. So when we are able to understand all these things, then we can know what we mean by human act. And what we have taken here, it is just taken from the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. Now we know what is a moral act. Now the question, whether that moral act is a good act or evil act. How to distinguish between a good act and a bad act or right action and wrong action. This topic is basically on that, and the title is called The Moral Determinants. That means these are the factors that will determine whether a human act can be known as good act or evil act. And what are these moral determinants? There are three in number: end, circumstances, and object. They are the end, the circumstances, and the object. Primarily speaking, it is the end that determines an action to be good or bad. For example, in teleological argument, we know, proposed by St. Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, etc., a teleological argument will place a particular end or a purpose or a goal in front of us, and looking at our individual activities, particular activities, whether this particular act is good or bad is judged whether it will take me to attain that particular end. As an example, we can say, now you are all listening to the class, isn't it? Now the question, whether this listening is something good or evil, how to know that? First of all, we should know what we are listening, then why we are listening. And when this question of why is coming, or for what it is coming, then you will say, you want to pass the ethics exam. Okay, well and good. For what you want to pass the ethics exam? Then you may answer, I want to complete my philosophy. Again, well and good. Again the question comes, for what you want to complete the philosophy? Then you have the next step, next. Accordingly, it will be moving up. Finally, it should reach that particular end or that particular purpose upon which your life is moving. And according to St. Thomas Aquinas, it is the beatific vision, seeing God face to face. Now, each and every activity of ours to be examined in the framework of that beatific vision, and we have to examine this particular act, whether it is good or bad, considering if my listening of this class will take me to that particular end, then it is good, or else it is something bad. That is why, primarily speaking, it is the end that determines an action to be good or to be bad. And then, to understand this, we have to understand the various kinds of ends, because in our moral classes, and again when you go for theology, you may hear about there are so many kinds of ends, and we should be familiar with these terms. What is the exact meaning of this word end and its variants? So the first variant, we can say, it is the end which. It's the end which. That means what? The end to be realized by the agent through the action. That is called the end which. The end to be realized by the agent through the action. Example, you are listening to the class, and what is the end you are going to realize? To pass the exam. So the end which means to pass the exam, ethics exam. This is one of the examples. Or anything you can just start up just like this. That is the first division, the end which. Then with this end which, another term is coming, the end for which. That means the purpose of that particular activity. Example again, you are listening to the class to pass the examination. Now the question, for what? That is a purpose. Then you have the purpose ahead of you, that is to complete your philosophy. So to complete your philosophy is an end for which. The purpose of passing the ethics exam is to complete your philosophy. So these are the two types of ends. The end which means what we are doing, and the end for which means the purpose according to that what we are doing. So these are the two terms, the first division. Now more important, another division is coming. There are 4 in number: proximate end, remote end, intermediate end, and the ultimate end. These are the terms, very ethical, and in moral theology also all these terms will be again and again repeated. Proximate end, remote end, intermediate end, and ultimate end. How to explain this? Again we take the old example of listening to ethics class now, just now, what you are doing. Now, the proximate end means the end which is closer to me. That is called the proximate end. The immediate end or immediate purpose. That is called the proximate end. The immediate purpose of your attending or listening to the class is to pass the ethics examination. So that is the proximate end. And the proximate end here, then we have the remote end. Remote end means it is just opposite of the proximate end. It is remote. It is far, far, far away from this particular end. For example, to become a priest. To become a priest, completing ethics is needed, philosophy needed, moral theology needed, the all theological courses needed, then only you will be eligible to become a priest. So, listening now this class of ethics, listen again, listening now this class of ethics will make you to become a priest or help you to become a priest. So, it's a condition to become a priest or any profession you are going for, looking at. It is a need. In that case, that we can consider as a remote end and listening is a proximate end. You got it, the difference. Now, the intermediate end. Intermediate end means any end that is in between the proximate and the remote or the ultimate end, such ends are called intermediate end. So, pass the philosophy, complete the philosophy is an intermediate end. Then going for theology is another intermediate end. Then attending moral theology, another intermediate end. All what is coming in between the proximate and remote, or all what is coming in between the proximate and the ultimate, they are called the intermediate ends. And finally, we have the ultimate end. Ultimate end means after that, the action, with that, the action will be complete. With that, the full chain of action will be complete. That is called an ultimate end. Just take a 1 unit of our action, listening to the ethics class for the purpose of passing the ethics examination. So, we can say this listening will lead me to pass the exam. That can be an ultimate end of this particular unit of action. But this will lead to another unit and another unit and another unit. Finally, there will be an absolutely ultimate end means that is the finality of everything, above which or outside of that there is no question why, for what, no question will come up. So, that is called an ultimate end. So, we know then 2 types of ultimates are there. One is relatively ultimate and the second one absolutely ultimate, not absolutely ultimate. So, relatively ultimate and absolutely ultimate. What's the difference between relatively absolute and absolutely ultimate? First thing, relatively means when it is the end of a particular unit of action. That's we said listening to the class and passing the exam is a single unit. If that is the end, the passing the exam, it's a relatively absolute end. That means this end can lead us to further ends. It can lead us to further. That is why it is called a relatively absolute. It is not a completely absolute thing. It is only a relatively absolute. On the other hand, as St. Thomas placing it in front of us, the beatific vision. That's the end of human life. The beatific vision. Outside of that, there is no question at all because it is complete in itself. So, such a kind of ends are called absolutely ultimate end, absolutely ultimate end, beyond which there is nothing. That will answer all our questions. So, this is the division. So, we know the proximate end, the remote end, the intermediate end and the absolute end. Another division is there. They are primary and secondary ends. Primary and secondary ends. Primary end means when it is the main one among many ends, then we can say it is the primary end. The secondary end means together with the primary end, there may be some other purposes united with the primary end. Such ends are called secondary ends. Whenever we do an action, whenever there is a chain of action or whenever there is a unit of action, there will be always a primary end and so many secondary ends. For example, we all like to play games. A football game, a football match. Now, we are playing. The primary end may be amusement. So, entertainment. The primary end of going for game is for entertainment. But together with that entertainment, we are also achieving the bodily health. Then, the mental training. So many things will be there. So, all such things are secondary ends, but they are important. But there will be one primary end and there will be subordinate ends. They are called secondary ends. So, in any action, not only one end, there are so many ends are there. The next division is called objective and subjective end. The objective end means the object outside of me, that means a thing in itself. A thing in itself. Maybe a house outside. And the subjective end means my purpose for that house or my enjoyment of using that house. That is called the subjective end. So, when there is a house or a building or a room and when I occupy it and I arrange it for myself and if I start enjoying it, that is called the subjective end. But the objective end is that is a thing in itself. And the final, natural and supernatural end. Natural end means any purpose or anything that can be achieved only by my own effort. A human effort can achieve it. Such things are called natural ends. Passing the examination, normally it's a natural end because you are all clever people and you can pass the examination. But there are some people like our Maria Vianney, Saint Maria Vianney, very weak in studies. Such a persons, for a natural capacity, they may not be able to understand the classes and they pass the examination, but they need something above, divine grace and the help from above. Such things are called supernatural end. So, if this end can be achieved by my own capacity alone, it is called a natural end. If I need something supernatural intervention there, then it is called a supernatural end. And St. Thomas Aquinas taking us for the beatific vision, our final end. It is not at all a natural end. Why? Because by my effort alone, it is impossible for me to achieve that. Therefore, I need the grace from God. Only God's providence and protection and grace can take me to that level. That means such ends are called supernatural end. Now, why we speak about these divisions of end in the matter of human act and morality? Because every human act, ultimately speaking, is for an end. There must be an end. Otherwise, the action will not be complete. Because it is the end or the goal that is motivating my intellect and my will to achieve it. So we know the rational will be always motivated with a rational purpose or a rational object. So to achieve that, I have to work. So when the action is starting from myself, and it will be complete only when it is able to achieve that particular purpose. That is why it is called every human action should have an end. Should have an end. The object. One of the three moral determinants. What do you mean by an object? An object means it is that which the will intends directly and primarily. It can be a thing or it can be an external act. And essentially speaking, this is something very, very important in our moral activity. There are certain objects, they are intrinsically and by nature good or evil. There are certain objects or there are certain activity of ours intrinsically and by its very nature good or evil. For example, killing. It is intrinsically and by very nature of it, it is something evil and that must be avoided. Helping a person or loving a person, it is intrinsically and by nature, it is something good. It must be promoted. But on the other hand, there are other things, incidentally and by reason of a precept, it may become good or evil. There are certain acts or certain things, they are not intrinsically and by nature good or evil, but incidentally and by reason of a precept or a law, it may be either good or evil. For example, when you walk or when you drive, there are traffic rules that you have to take the left side or the right side according to the country in which you are driving. Suppose it's a private road to your home and no other vehicle will be coming, you are free to drive either left side or right side, no matter where there is a rule or not. It is not affecting you. But when you are driving in a public place, you have to go with that. And if you ask, what's the difference between using the right side or left side? What is the morality there? It is only driving and careful driving. No, isn't it? But since there is a law prescribing that only right side or left side you have to keep your driving, then if you are going against that, it become evil. So driving in itself is not intrinsically and by nature good or bad, but it is good or bad incidentally or by reason of a precept. Then again, when we speak about object, there can be the distinction between material object and formal object. Material object means the act in itself, and the formal object, the purpose or intention of the person. The material object means the action in itself. The formal object is the intention of the person. And many a times we have to distinguish this also when there is a case. When there is a case, we have to distinguish this also. For example, two of you have the same kind of pen. Same ditto. Maybe, very costly pen. And the same thing you have received as a gift from somebody. And you are using it and very carefully taking care of it. One day, a person just took the pen from the desk of the other person thinking that it is his own. And when the other one is asking, he will defend himself. No, I know that this is my own. I am very sure. The other person said, no, it is my own. And there will be a clash. So, A has taken a pen from B, believing that it belongs to A. Or Suresh has taken a pen of Sadish, believing that it is Suresh's. And Sadish is asking back and Suresh is defending himself, telling it is mine and I am very confident about it, it is mine. And Sadish is telling, no, you are cheating me and you have taken it, it is a robbery, it is a theft. After this fight between themselves, the matter was not settled. Suresh went his room and find his own pen is there in the room. So Suresh is now having two pens. Now the question, is it a theft? Whether he is responsible for that or not. Materially speaking, yes, it's a theft. Yes, because he has taken something from other without his knowledge and without his permission. That is called a robbery, it's a theft. On the other hand, when we say about the formal object, he has no intention of taking that from his friend. If he is knowing that it belongs to his friend, he will never take it. But he thought that it is his own and that is why he is taking it. So, there morally speaking, he is not responsible. So when we speak about the object, this distinction must be taken very carefully. The material object, that means an act in itself, and the formal object, the intention of the agent, why that person commit that activity, particular act. So that's all about the object. How an object determines our moral character. We said certain objects are intrinsically and by nature either good or evil. So the good must be done and the evil must be avoided. Certain objects not intrinsically and by nature good or evil, but because of certain precepts and law, incidentally it may become good or evil. And as far as that law or precept exists, he has to go with that. And we set the division between material object and the formal object, and that means the act in itself and the intention of the person. Therefore, we are clear about how an object is working as a moral determinant.